Arashi, Prince of the Sky. Chapter 29, Cascading Dreams.
The boys traveled through space and time, for the journey within is one of a lifetime. To acquire the tools to grow, they must be reflective in the world of dreams, where reality is nothing more than a figment of their imagination, where eternity meets the past, and the past meets the future, in a rain of cascading dreams. 1. Rebirth. Light, pure light, and the beating of a healthy heart. That was all he knew. What was this feeling? This feeling of warmth and security, wrapped in a cape of starlight, twinkling brilliant colors and hues like the spectrum of a rainbow, times a million. He could hear muffled voices calling to him. He was so curious. What were they saying? Are they calling me? He moved toward them, and the closer and closer he got to the voices, the clearer they became. Then the light began to fade, and shadows appeared. Suddenly, he couldn't breathe, and his blanket disappeared. The voices became noise, loud noises, and the air was cold on his bare skin. His eyes couldn't adjust fast enough. He was just seeing shadows all around him, hands touching and grabbing him, poking him and rubbing him harshly. This welling up he felt inside burst forth from a voice he didn't know he had. He cried and cried, wishing he had not followed those voices, wishing he had his warm blanket and his rainbow of lights. But suddenly, the warmth came back, and the hands let him go, and he was wrapped again. Not like before, but it was nice. He kept crying out for his heartbeat again, the only thing he knew. Then he heard it, the heartbeat. It wasn't his own, but he knew this heartbeat. He had heard this heartbeat before. He knew this heart, the beating and the rhythm. He looked up with his new eyes and saw a face he would never forget. She whispered to him gently, "Hello, my prince. Welcome to the world." She kissed his head with her warm lips, and he began to glow. Love, he felt it. And so he found his light. 2. Reflection. Look at me, he said, the sound echoing in the dark. Look at me, he said louder. The echo boomed back. Look at me! He yelled bloody murder over and over and over again, the echoes never stopping, building in response to his volume. His thoughts were a jumbled mess. Who am I? What am I? A thought would come to him and leave the next moment, confused and lost. He didn't know what to do. Then he broke, and in the darkness, there was breathing. He listened to the sound as it breathed short, shallow breaths. It breathed in and out faster and faster until it took another deep breath and exhaled slowly. It did this over and over and over again until its breathing was calm, and seconds would go by without a single sound or breath taken. He then realized that he was mimicking the breathing to his own. Slowly, light began to come in from nowhere in particular. It got brighter and brighter until a blinding light was all he could see. I'm not ready for the light. Bring back the dark, he asked. As the space darkened, a reflection appeared through the shadows of light and dark. A voice from beyond called out to him and said, "Ask, and you shall be." And there he was, staring back at him. 3. Release.
Anad? Anad! Where are you?
Sarai yelled out into the field. Anad had convinced him to go out into the sunflower field. They had been told many times before not to go into the fields, but Anad insisted that they explore the fields at least one time.
Oh, come on, brother. Don't let them tell you what to do. Let me.
Anad's voice echoed in the wind as Sarai spun around, unable to see anything beyond the giant flowers. He sat down in the dirt crying. In a rage, he tried pulling up one of the stalks from the ground, but it wouldn't budge. He pulled and pulled with all his strength. He wrapped both hands around the stalk of the giant flower and pulled as hard as he could, but it wouldn't budge. Suddenly, he heard a buzzing and felt a pinch on the back of his neck. He cried out and fell backward. Burning pain on his neck made him double over. "Never take what is not freely given," a voice whispered to him. He was squeezing his neck, trying to snuff the pain away.
Anad!
He cried out again. Then his brother appeared. He was holding a dead rabbit in one hand and holding his own neck in the other. He walked up to where Sarai was and kneeled down next to him, his eyes wild like a predator. Sarai looked at his brother, then down at the brown rabbit. There were no open wounds that he could see on it.
What happened to it?
Anad looked at him and held up the rabbit. He reached around with his other hand and began to strangle the rabbit. It came back to life and started kicking again, with little stifled screams escaping from its constricted throat. Mortified, Sarai got to his feet and lunged at his brother, causing him to release his hold on the rabbit. It landed on his feet and ran away as the brothers wrestled on the ground. Sarai was on top of his brother, holding his hands down. Anad looked up at him with a blank expression. Then he started laughing. Sarai looked at him like he was insane. He immediately got up and walked away from his brother. His brother scared him sometimes. Even though looking at him was like looking in the mirror, he feared that one day he may be like him. He feared for others when they were around Anad. He was reckless and always got them in some kind of trouble. He walked away, holding his neck in pain and crying, and he could still hear his brother off in the distance. He came to a small open patch, and there was a tiny hole in the ground. The little brown rabbit that his brother had caught poked his head out of the hole. Sarai bent down and held his hand out to it. It wouldn't come at first. It probably thought that he was his brother, and he knew there was danger. So he stood up and started to walk away. But as he did, the rabbit came running out of the hole. It was holding something in its mouth. Sarai turned and bent down to accept it from the rabbit. It was a tiny rose quartz crystal. It beamed and glowed in the palm of his hand as the rabbit scurried away back into its home. Sarai examined the stone. It was pink and translucent. The energy from it gave a feeling of security, compassion, and love. He stood and turned towards another giant flower. It looked to be dying, but it was the tallest one there. Feeling the need to help it on its journey, Sarai reached down to the bottom of the stalk and pulled. The roots immediately came free from the ground. He laid the stalk down gently. Then he noticed a glimmering in the dirt where he pulled the root from. He dug around with his hands and dusted the dirt off the item. It was a smooth blue stone, aquamarine, the stone of healing, clarity, and courage. He placed both stones in his pocket, but suddenly felt a stinging in the pit of his stomach. However, he knew it wasn't him. It was Anad. He ran towards where he last saw his brother and stopped abruptly when he met his eyes. He was covered in black ink from head to toe. Anad was standing in the middle of the sunflower field, shaking uncontrollably. Sarai rushed over and threw his arms around him, trying to get him to stop. He just shivered until his legs gave out from under him. Still holding on to him, Sarai gently laid him down on the ground as Sarai began to cry. He couldn't do anything to help his brother. He cried with him as he continued to shake, and his breathing became slower and slower until he breathed no longer. Sarai cried out in anguish, the pain so deep he thought it would kill him, like he would never be able to breathe again without the pain. He cried and cried until his form burst into light and traveled back to the stars. Four, forgiveness. The tiger watched the thunderclouds roll by as the storm in his heart continued to brew. Day by day, his forest was disappearing. The humans were moving in and building territories for their villages, expanding further and further into his homelands. He could see the smoke from their fire pits rising into the air above. The smell and the smoke from their meat and spices were burning his nostrils and eyes. He wanted nothing more than to rise up and destroy each and every one of them. Their existence has been nothing but a cancer to his world. If they were allowed to continue, the world would surely suffer. He's been the guardian of this forest for hundreds of lifetimes, watched it grow and become home to millions of creatures, spirits, and people, sharing the balance with love and with honor. He approached the humans long ago when they first arrived to his land. They were scared of him. After all, he was the god of the forest. They revered him as the authority and respected his wishes. But as time went by, the humans all but forgot their loyalty to him by burning trees and poisoning the water and soil with their disease, innovations, and developments. They even found ways of warding off spirits with magic and spices to keep them away. He began to hate the humans for the corruption and destruction they were bringing to the world, and wished for nothing but their quick and hasty demise. The sun had set, and the half moon peeked out from behind the clouds. The rain was falling and cleansing the air. He looked up and saw the spirits of the sky, the mighty dragon Arashi and the phoenix Ishara. They danced and sparkled like starlight under the veil of the moon. They were different from the land spirits, because up there, they didn't have to deal with the humans coming into their space. Then, suddenly something caught his eye. It was moving quickly through the forest grounds below him. He sensed it was something sinister, and with one great push, he leapt off the edge of the cliff and glided down to the valley below, his enormous body landing like a feather on the ground. There, in the darkness, he saw the red glowing eyes of a black stag. It looked at him, cautious not to make any sudden moves. It was surrounded by shadow creatures. Some were hanging from the trees. Others were just rolling around on the ground below. The dark energy emanating from the stag was palpable. It was the spirit of fear.
What are you doing in my forest?
He growled. The stag bent its head slightly to show respect, its sinister eyes never leaving his own.
Pardon me, mighty king of the forest. I mean no disrespect. I was simply passing through. But actually, I believe I can do you a favor. And what favor is that? Rid you of the humans, of course. It would only be my duty and my pleasure, Your Majesty.
The dark spirits around him giggled and cackled. He knew of fear. It was a destructive spirit that fed off the emotions of the humans as their fears became stronger. Before humans understood language, fear was nothing more than the shadow of a ghost in this land. The humans began to create stories of tragedy with their words, but they did not know that the power of speech is magic. They were doing a disservice unto themselves, which ultimately led to their own demise. Of course, he wanted the humans gone, but at what cost? The thunder continued to echo through the sky. The stag looked up in annoyance, completely disgusted by the sound. It knew that the mighty dragon spirit was the only one capable of releasing the humans from fear's whispers. They were immortal enemies.
Well, Tiger, do we have a deal.
Fear was waiting for his reply. He wanted so desperately for the humans to go away, but was trusting this evil spirit to do it wise. Did he even have a choice in the matter? If nothing is done, the humans will destroy the entire forest, the only home he ever knew. And so, he too would be no more.
Once the deed is done, leave this place and never return.
The tiger said, jumping up into the trees and disappearing again into the dark.
As you wish.
The tiger returned to his watching post on the cliff. His mind was racing. He was never one for violence, and he would never dream of harming the humans himself. Sending Fear to do his dirty work felt like a mistake. It made him feel like a coward, full of remorse. The moon rose higher in the sky as the night would soon come to an end, and the screams could be heard coming from the village. The tiger straightened himself up and poked his ears, listening to the screams as they continued to echo through the night, until he saw the flames. They climbed higher and higher until they reached the peak of the trees and began spreading throughout the forest. In seconds, the tiger was leaping through the sky and over trees towards the flames.
You fool!
He said to himself as he reached the forest limits. The flames were wild and jumping from tree to tree as if they were alive. And then he saw eyes in the embers. Fear rose out of the fire as its shadowy body danced in the midst of the flames.
Almighty Forest King! So nice to see you again. Are you content with my work? Yes!
The tiger looked past him in horror at each home that was now completely engulfed in raging fire. Then he looked back at Fear with deep, unrelenting pain in his heart, regretting the foolish choice he'd made.
Leave! No!
He roared, sending a shockwave of energy outward at Fear. The blast doused some of the flames and sent Fear rearing backward, but it came back and laughed unaffected.
How wonderful! True powers from a true god! These people were full of fear, worry, and doubt. And they got exactly what they deserved. As shall you!
Fear exploded into a flurry of flames, ready to obliterate the tiger spirit and turn everything to ash. But just before the flames reached him, a brilliant blue light came rocketing down to earth from the sky and collided directly into the flames, snuffing them out. The tiger managed to withstand the blast as the area around him became a wasteland of ash and debris. A sudden gust of wind cleared out the smoke to reveal a small boy standing in the middle of the impact. He could see the last remnants of Fear fading into the sky like a ghost. The boy turned slowly toward the tiger. His skin was brilliant and glowing from the inside, and the diamond on his forehead was lit up like a star. He was amazed and stunned. "Tiger, come!" the boy ordered to him. He complied, walking up to the boy slowly, feeling his energy. It was electric, vibrating at such a frequency that he had to steady himself as he got closer. This boy was powerful, a god for sure. "Change! Now!
I'd rather not.
Transform now before I fry you!" Arashi barked at the tiger. He looked down at the boy and showed him his teeth.
Go ahead and try.
The tiger knew he stood no match to the boy, but his pride would not allow him to fold so easily. Before he could blink, the boy reached back and punched him in the middle of the head, sending him sprawling backward into a tree stump. Before he hit the ground, his body was transformed into that of a young man. He rolled backward and came to an abrupt stop on his back. The little boy was standing over him instantly. Arashi held out his hand for him to take, but he pushed it away and stood up on his own. His legs were wobbly as he examined his new form. He'd never transformed into a human before. It was alien to him, weak and very naked. He looked at Arashi angrily. "Why did you do this?" "I could ask you the same thing," Arashi said, holding out his arms and pointing for him to look around at the ghost of a village that was left behind. I didn't do this." "Oh no? Well, you are surely the reason it happened. You are the protector of this region, are you not? Nothing gets in or out without you knowing. You sent fear to those people, and it almost destroyed you. You're welcome, by the way." The tiger boy shook his head as the truth set in. It was in fact his fault. He dropped to his knees as the weight of his shame weighed heavy on his shoulders, and he knew what the boy was saying was true, as much as he didn't want it to be. "Transformed you into a human so that at least you can know what it feels like." The tiger boy looked down at his human hands and looked up towards the burned down village. "I just wanted them to go away. They were destroying my forest. I was foolish and desperate." Arashi bent down to his eye level and placed his hand to his shoulder. "What's your name?" I don't have a name. I am the spirit of the forest, the tiger of the mountains. I was never given a name." "Well, why don't you name yourself?" He shook his head, confused by the strange request to name himself. "Okay, I'll just call you Tiger. Cool?" "Yes, I suppose. And you are?" "Oh, well, I've been given many different names, but the Japanese named me the Arashi, so it stuck. The spirit of the storm, the dragon of lightning, and blah blah blah." His eyes widened in surprise. He should have known. This boy is one of the elementals, the dragon of the sky. "I am so sorry for what I allowed to happen. Understand that I did it to protect the forest and every creature that lives here." Tiger begged his forgiveness, but Arashi just shook his head. "It's okay. I mean, it was messed up, but I understand. Know this, fear is not an ally. It is the enemy. It's even the enemy to your enemy, but that does not make it your ally. Fear spreads like wildfire. It doesn't matter who or what it consumes. It just takes everything. I understand why you did what you did. I just want you to know that it was wrong. Take my hand." Arashi stood up, and Tiger took his hand and stood as well. He whistled, and moments later, a tiny cloud appeared before them. Arashi hopped on and beckoned for Tiger to hop on as well. "Aren't humans supposed to wear cloth over their skin? I'm freezing," Tiger said, becoming more aware of himself. Arashi simply lifted his fingers over his head and spun it in a circle, as clothes weaved around Tiger's body from thin air. An orange poncho appeared to cover him from head to toe. Arashi wore a similar dark blue poncho. Tiger thanked him and jumped onto the cloud. It was the softest thing he'd ever felt. The cloud didn't waste any time. It shot into the air and sailed through the sky. Tiger had never experienced the sky in this way. They circled the horizon for what felt like hours, watching the sun peek into day. They landed back on Tiger's peak from where he overlooked the forest. They got off the cloud and stood looking over the night sky. He looked over at Arashi in awe. He has never had company up here with him. Now he was sharing space with the spirit of the sky. "I'm glad I didn't have to kill you." Tiger laughed and punched him in the arm. They sat and talked until the sun again left the sky. They spoke about fear, people, the spirits, and the balance of the world. They spoke in detail about the depth of life and the inevitability of death for all beings. Feeling connected to one another, their bond grew with each word. "I've never spoken this way with anyone before. It's only ever been just me." There was a brief silence. Arashi looked off into the rising sun across the horizon. He looked back at Tiger and smiled. His dark blue-gray eyes catching the sunlight. You never have to be alone again. Arashi left to return to his duties in the sky shortly after. But he would return every half moon and chat with Tiger from dusk to dawn. And they watched day by day as the rain Arashi created brought the forest back to life. It was their new normal as Eternals of the Earth, and they knew their friendship would never die. This lasted for 100 years, until the humans slowly returned and destroyed the forest completely, with buildings and cities, ridding the land of its magic. Without a home and unable to leave, Tiger disappeared, lost in the memory of a home that will never be again. Arashi returned to their spot and searched for him. Desperate, he searched for 1,000 years, looking for Tiger in the clouds, the seas, and in the veil of the moon. Arashi never found his friend and missed him dearly. But he knew that one day their spirits would find one another again in the sea of endless time, where spirits never truly die. Five, patience.
Yes, I'm aware of the cost. You know what? I'd like to speak to your supervisor.
Cody was exasperated. He was standing at the ticket gate, trying to fix something. He had just missed his flight to Africa by 12 minutes. 12 freaking minutes. He could have been in his seat, drinking a Jack and Coke, watching some horrible in-flight movie, but that wasn't the case today. All because some jerk decided he wanted to jump off the freeway. Apparently, the news was reporting that his wife left him for another woman, which triggered his suicide. Cody sympathized with the man, but he didn't know what it felt like to be in love. Furthermore, to be betrayed by the one you loved. He never experienced it, so he couldn't judge. Maybe being in love and then losing it really could make you want to end it all. If that was the case, he decided that he did not need that type of stress. He was 27 years old and had better things to do than getting caught up in some lover's quarrel. But today couldn't have been a worse day. This flight to Africa was a gift to himself. After working day and night all these years to get his own place, his own business, and managing to somehow stay out of trouble, he didn't need love. But he was finally in a place financially where he could treat himself. He was always looking out for others. Now it was time for him to look out for himself. Ever since he was a kid, bouncing from group home to group home, his dreams of Morocco never left him, almost haunting him.
Okay, sir. Give me 1 minute.
The flight attendant picked up the phone and waited for someone to answer. He hadn't bought flight insurance. He kicked himself for that. But who knew something like this would happen? He planned everything so well and left hours before he was supposed to be at the airport and still didn't make it on time. Of course, he realized that's the whole purpose for buying insurance for things you can't control, which seemingly is everything and nothing. Cody was beyond upset. He was trying to keep his composure, but it was becoming harder and harder to contain as the seconds rolled by, as he was standing here talking to this chick and not on his flight. He spent his entire savings on this trip. He tried to not think about it. He started sweating as his nerves were getting the best of him. The ticket agent was waiting patiently for someone to answer the call, while he was constantly tapping his foot impatiently.
Mr. Shea, I'm so sorry. That was the last flight and the doors have already closed. You'll have to book another trip.
The words fell on him like a pile of spiked bricks. He put his head down and felt a well of pain in his chest. Without another word, he picked up his bags and made his way to the nearest restroom as fast as he could. He feared that whatever was swelling up inside of him might explode and be seen by everyone around him. He burst into the bathroom and entered the nearest stall, slamming the door behind him as his body started to convulse. He bent over the toilet and heaved, but nothing came out. He heaved again and lurched his body forward, but still nothing. Nothing. All that nothing was followed by a flood of tears. He was thinking about how badly he wanted to escape the life he was living every day. The repetition of mindlessly working day after day just to give his money up to keep living the same cycle. He felt like a slave to his life, and he was constantly being thrown back on his ass, which made it even worse.
Why? Why is it always me? What am I doing wrong?
He sobbed until he was physically and emotionally tired. He sat down on the seat, feeling sorry for himself. And what was worse, he didn't have anyone he could call or depend on for support or help. He worked constantly to keep himself busy to the point that he never took the time to get to know anyone, not well enough to develop the kind of closeness that would allow him to be transparent and vulnerable. Keeping his distance from people had always made him feel safe. He always felt he was the only person he could actually trust. Now he found himself sitting here alone in a dirty bathroom stall, feeling sorry for himself, all because some poor schmuck gave his heart to someone that apparently broke it and threw it away along with him. Then he realized that he was that man that didn't know love. And at that very moment, he felt like the loneliest person on earth. A sad truth he had to sit with. He began to slip down a funnel of thoughts and reflections of his past.
What was the point of this anyway? What's it all leading up to? Just like that man on the freeway. He didn't want his life anymore. He was tired. Having to wake up every day and repeatedly do the things you don't want to do, with the empty promise that if you work hard, it will help you to get to where you want to be. Bullcrap. It's all just a sick game that will trap you in a place you don't want to be. It sucks. It sucks. This sucks. Life sucks. And I don't want to spend another moment wondering when my day will come to be free. But I'm not going to be like that man. I'm not going to make a spectacle of my sadness or ruin another one's day. He wouldn't be that selfish. No, I won't ruin someone else's chance to be happy. I'm just tired.
He dug into his bag and rummaged around for a moment, pulling out a bottle of pills, sleeping pills. He shook the contents of the bottle out onto his hand. There was more than enough here to put him to sleep for good. He took a moment to think about what he was contemplating.
Shut up.
So he decided, no more doing just to be. He just wanted to be without doing anything at all. And the only way to do that is in death. His heart started to race as his hands shook harshly.
Next stop, paradise.
He brought the pills up to his mouth, when suddenly his watch began to whistle. It was an old antique watch that a friend made for him years ago when he was still living in the group homes, but it never worked. It was just a silly kid's invention. He wore it for sentimental value, but right now it was buzzing, loudly. He looked at it in shock. He heard someone enter the bathroom and was running the water to wash his hands. He decided to put the pills back in the bottle for a moment and find out who it was. He wiped the tears from his eyes and composed himself before opening the door to the stall. There at the sink stood the most beautiful person he'd ever seen in real life. The man wore a blue suit and a white tie with a black scarf around his neck. He had jet black locks pulled into a ponytail, and his skin glowed honey caramel brown. His eyes were like gemstones, dark blue and gray. He finished washing his hands and grabbed a towel from the dispenser. He looked up and noticed Cody looking at him. Meanwhile, the buzzing from the watch had not stopped. Cody just stood there in shock. His heart was beating out of his chest, and he seemed to have lost all types of motor skills and social cues. The man looked at him, flashed a beautiful smile, and said, hey, you gonna get that? Snapping out of his daze, Cody proceeded to push buttons on the watch that he'd never used before.
My bad. I was, sorry. It's never done this before. I'm sorry.
Cody walked over to the sink as the man chuckled and reached his hand out. Here, let me try, the man said, but when he touched the watch, it sparked and went dead. Oh shit. I'm so sorry. I think I broke it. Me and Tech don't get along too well.
It's okay. Now it can go back to being broken, like it's been since I've had it. Which is way too long anyway.
As Cody was rubbing and looking the watch over, he noticed a tiny stone was inside of it. He picked it out and looked it over. It was a rainbow-colored stone. Rainbow quartz. He remembered something about it removing negative energy blocks in the aura. Interesting, he thought. Putting it in his pocket, he then looked at the man in his eyes and had to catch his breath again. He tried not to stare too hard.
Hi, I'm Cody Shay, and I am way too old to be wearing watches made for children.
Cody said, holding out his hand. The man chuckled. He liked the way he laughed. Hey, no judgment, bro. My name is Arashi, and my friends call me Ari. But, bro, you gonna wash your hands first?
Oh, my bad. Now, you said your name was Ari, right?
Cody asked, quickly running his hands under the water with soap and then drying them. Yeah, Ari. Arashi was holding out his hands. When their skin met, every part of his body lit up like the 4th of July. It was like all of his troubles just sailed away, down a river and off a waterfall, never to return again. He felt such an abundance of warm feelings that he had to check in with himself to make sure if he was high or not. His grip was soft and firm, and he didn't want to let go.
Nice to meet you, Ari. Have we met before?
No. I don't think we have. At least not this lifetime. I think we would have remembered. Can I have my hand back, please?
Sure you can. It's yours anyway. Sorry. Normally I'm much better at this. It's just that you're so... yeah.
Well, you're just so too, Cody Shay. Here. Arashi smiled and pulled out a passport from inside his suit pocket. It was Cody's. You left it at the ticket counter. The lady called out to you, but you didn't hear her. I told her I'd get it to you. Hey, cool name, by the way. Cody took his passport, embarrassed but grateful. Then the reality of his situation began to set back in for a moment.
Thanks. Wow. I'm having such a day.
Cody, we all have those days, right? But I'm glad I was able to get it back to you, because you're gonna need it. Cody put the passport in his pocket and kept his eyes low.
No, I'm not gonna need it. I missed my flight, and there's no way for me to get to Africa now. No time soon, anyway.
He was thinking about all the hours he had put in to save up that money that he basically just threw away. Feeling for him, Arashi put his hand on his shoulder. Hey, it's gonna be fine. Look, today really is your lucky day.
How's that?
Well, I'm a motivational speaker. I travel all over to tell people about the most important thing in the world, self-love. Then it hit him. That's where Cody recognized his face. He was on TV and billboards all over the city. He was famous.
What? I'm speechless. Like, really speechless.
Hey, great choice of words. But I want you to live your dreams, Cody. And to trust and know that everything you want is in arm's reach. The universe is on your side. I have a private plane leaving here to Africa in 20 minutes. I was headed there as I was passing your gate, and something told me I needed to meet you. Well, will you join me? Cody was overcome with emotion. He couldn't believe it at first. He didn't know what else to do but to hug him. They embraced for a long time as Cody cried freely. Hey, no tears on the suit, dude. They laughed as Arashi gave him a hand towel to clean his face. Cody felt like he looked a mess, but he laughed even through his tears.
I'd almost given up on myself. Thank you. Thank you for saving my life.
Hey, you are very welcome, Cody. Sometimes, bad things happen to make way for great things to happen. Just trust in yourself. You deserve everything this life has to offer. Arashi lifted Cody's chin and then placed his hand to his heart. No fear lives here. Only love can fill this space. Cody felt the energy surge through his body like a warm IV was stuck in his arm.
Wow, you are good.
Yep, that's why they pay me the big bucks. Come on, we got a fight to catch. Hold my hand. Cody looked at him and smiled.
Two grown men walking out of the bathroom holding hands? Sure, why the hell not?
Cody took Arashi's hand for the first time. He felt what he'd only seen acted out in movies and fairy tales. He knew deep down in the core of his being that he would love this man until the very end of time. He glowed from within as they walked into the light, hand in hand. Six, evolve. The steps looked as if they would never end, but he kept walking, knowing he was so close to his goal. Even though he couldn't see it, he knew it was near. He walked and walked and walked, never tiring, looking back only to reflect on his journey, but never for too long. He marched on, sometimes skipping 2 steps at a time. He felt sure of himself, sure of his journey, and he knew if he kept moving, that he would eventually get there. There was no other choice. I'm getting there, and no one can walk for me. He walked and walked, in a thought of nothing else but to keep moving. Then, out of nowhere, he saw it, right in front of his eyes, his soul. The blue diamond hung soundlessly in the space, illuminating from within like the sun to the moon. He was the light that gave it brilliance. He walked up to the massive crystal and felt its warm glow. It vibrated warmly underneath his skin. He closed his eyes and matched the vibration of the crystal. Then he found himself inside of it, lost in the endless blue light. He needed this time here, needed his time to evolve. So there he sat until his time came. End of chapter 29.